to me, it looks pretty terrible. I think that's not the way forward. The problem is, in ice competition.
Listen, guys, Formula One is currently watching its greatest active driver walk toward the exit door. And instead of fixing the problem, the sport handed him the keys itself. They give him a shrug. But here's what nobody is telling you properly. This isn't a story about a bad season or a struggling car. This is a story about a sport that was warned, ignored the warning, built the disaster anyway, and is now blaming the one man who saw it coming. We're going to break down exactly how Formula One got here. The warning. He said this 3 years ago. Let's go back to Austria, June 2023. Verstappen had just won a race so comfortably that his team stopped to put on an extra set of tires just to set the fastest lap. The man was untouchable. And at that exact moment, instead of celebrating, he stood in front of the media and said something that made everyone deeply uncomfortable. He said the 2026 regulations were heading in the wrong direction. He said drivers would actually need to downshift on the straights, not to slow down, but because the energy systems would make it faster to do so. He called the whole concept Frankenstein. He warned that whoever built the strongest engine would simply dominate, turning a sport built on skill into a horsepower lottery. And the paddock? They smiled, nodded, and completely ignored him. The regulations were already locked in. The manufacturers were committed. Verstappen was told, directly and indirectly, to relax. Fast forward to 2026, and every single word he said came true. The regulations are actually broken. Now let's talk about why the 2026 rules are genuinely a problem. Because once you understand this technical side, everything else clicks into place. The new power units split performance 50-50 between combustion and electrical power. The electrical motor now produces 3 times the output it did before, but the battery size stayed exactly the same. So you have triple the electrical demand pulling from the same reservoir. Think of it like a water pistol that fires 3 times harder but has the same size tank. You run dry fast, really fast. And when that battery drains mid-race, the car loses nearly half its total power. Not from a crash, not from a failure, just because the energy ran out. Verstappen experienced this firsthand in Japan. He passed Gasly into a chicane, then immediately had 0 battery on the following straight, and Gasly drove straight back past him like nothing happened. That's not racing. That's a battery management game wearing a racing helmet. Red Bull's season has been a disaster. Now, layer on top of all that what Red Bull are specifically going through this season. Because the RB22 situation is genuinely painful to watch if you understand what this car was supposed to represent. This was Red Bull's first car powered by their own engine, built in partnership with Ford. Years of investment, enormous resources, and the ambition to prove they could go toe-to-toe with Mercedes and Ferrari on raw power. Instead, at the Australian Grand Prix, both Red Bull cars started the race with completely empty batteries before a single racing lap was completed. Verstappen somehow drove from 20th to 6th and won Driver of the Day. China brought a gearbox failure. Then at Suzuka, he was knocked out of Q2 by Arvid Lindblad, a rookie in his debut season. Hold on, let that sit for a second. A debut season rookie knocked out the guy who once won 15 races in a single season. Red Bull currently sits 9th in the Constructors' Championship, behind Alpine. His problem isn't the results, it's the formula. Here's where the story gets really interesting, and this is the angle that most coverage is completely missing. Verstappen has been very clear about something. He said himself, and I'm paraphrasing here, that finishing 7th or 8th doesn't bother him. He's been in Formula One long enough to know that not every season is a championship season. What's bothering him is how the positions are being decided. He called it anti-driving. Think about what that actually means coming from someone who has spent his entire career pushing cars to their absolute limit. He's now being asked to lift off the throttle on a straight, not to manage tires, not to save fuel the traditional way, but to harvest battery energy so he has power available for the next corner. He went to the Nürburgring ring on his weekend off and drove a GT3 car with 150 other drivers on track. No energy management, no team strategy, just pure driving. And apparently, That felt more like racing than what Formula One is currently offering him.
The establishment responds. So, what did the Formula One establishment say when Verstappen started speaking publicly about all of this? Martin Brundle said his complaints had become boring and that he should either leave or stop talking about it. Damon Hill said if he's unhappy, he should stop and do something else. Eddie Irvine said Formula One doesn't need Max and pointed to his salary as a reason to stay quiet. But here's the part that genuinely blows my mind. Every single one of those men, in the same interviews, agreed that the regulations are broken. Irvine even called the safety situation alarming. Brundle said Verstappen's points were well made. So the message isn't that they think he's wrong. The message is that they think he should be wrong quietly. The establishment has essentially drawn a line that says you can be frustrated, but you cannot be loud about it, especially not if your team is struggling at the same time. That tells you more about how Formula One operates than any regulation document ever could.
Now, here's something that reframes this entire situation. When Verstappen signed his Red Bull contract back in 2022, he demanded an exit clause be written into the deal specifically because of his concerns about the 2026 rules. He wasn't reacting to a bad season in 2026. He was building his escape route 4 years before the crisis even arrived. That clause becomes active between August and October of this year if he's sitting outside the top 2 in the championship. Given that he currently has 12 points from 3 races, while Kimi Antonelli is already leading by a significant margin, activating that clause seems almost inevitable. Sources close to Verstappen suggest he's leaning toward a sabbatical rather than full retirement. Red Bull is reportedly willing to pay him to stay out of racing in 2027, hoping he returns in 2028 with fresh motivation. But a sabbatical without a reason to come back is just retirement with a softer name. So let's bring this all together. The 2026 regulations are technically broken in a way that turns racing into energy management. Red Bull's season has been historically bad. Verstappen's frustration isn't about losing, it's about a formula that no longer feels like driving. The establishment agrees with him privately but wants him silent publicly. And his exit clause is already sitting there, ready to activate in August. My honest opinion? Formula One is about to find out whether it built these regulations for the drivers or for everyone watching from outside the cars. And right now, the answer doesn't look good. But I want to know what you think. If the FIA makes changes in Miami, does that actually bring Verstappen back mentally? Or is the damage already done? Drop your answer below because this story is far from over.